Something the Ryuga Gotoku games do that really sets them above others is the real-world product tie-ins. Typically, inserting items for product placement in your games is tacky and immersion breaking for the player. Thanks to working with Yu Suzuki and seeing the tie-ins within Shenmue, Nagoshi already knew how they could work. Using the tie-ins to not only help build the world, but either through integrating them into the story or making them completely optional, drove players to actually seek them out. This adds an incredible amount of realism to the series and brings Kamurocho to life. Not only that, the partnership is of mutual benefit. Both parties get to advertise their products to different markets. Nagoshi and Kikuchi personally reached out to businesses to create the tie-ins for Ryuga Gotoku, rather than doing it through an advertising agency. At first, it was difficult to get businesses to understand who wants to associate their products with the Yakuza. Companies were actually concerned that it would have a negative effect on their reputation. That's why, as brand recognition grew, so did the tie-ins. Every subsequent game in the series, the team has pushed together more brands than the previous release. If the number of tie-ins cannot be reached, Nagoshi would consider that part of the game to be a failure. Kikuchi recounts going to a foreign car manufacturer to discuss a tie-in for Ryuga Gotoku. Sadly, the company turned it down, saying, "It wouldn't be a good thing for the Yakuza to be riding around in our cars, would it?" Luckily, there was one company that just got it right away though. Don Quixote was the very first business that agreed to partner with Ryuga Gotoku. The iconic shop with its attention-grabbing signage and catchy jingle has become a staple of the series as it is today. Suntory followed closely behind, but Don Quixote opened the doors for other tie-ins to take a chance. Can you imagine the Yakuza games without the Don Quixote? It just wouldn't be the same. When it came to the play spots though, Nagoshi and Kikuchi didn't agree quite as much. The main point of contention was the hostess clubs. Nagoshi wanted them, Kikuchi didn't. It's not that they were a bad thing, exactly, but Kikuchi felt going through conversations with hostesses would just be boring for a video game. Nagoshi was insistent that they would only add to the realism and charm of the world he was trying to create. In the end, Kikuchi relented and trusted Nagoshi's opinion. It paid off too. The hostess clubs ended up being one of the main staples of the series. It may not have been loved by all the fans, but for those that enjoy that kind of experience, it was one of the major drawing points of the game. As with all the play spots, including the cabaret, Nagoshi felt it was important that you could finish the entire game without playing them. Simply being available to the player would be enough, relying on them to draw people into the world and keep them there after the main plot had concluded. It was another gamble Nagoshi was taking, with the budget and development time already exceeding estimates. Adding such detailed side content that would only be discovered, let alone enjoyed, by the most hardcore players could have easily detracted from the core experience. Nagoshi had built a house of cards, and one wrong move or delay by any part of the team could end the project. With hostess clubs, other play spots, product tie-ins, and of course the main narrative, Ryuga Gotoku quickly became a huge game, especially for the time. Despite how janky the game is, testing actually took place and was quite extensive. Since the team was inexperienced with this sort of title, there was a learning curve to bug testing. According to members of the testing team, you could often hear people bug testing in the middle of the night. Sometimes they muttered to themselves about specific bugs that had yet to be fixed, despite their repeated requests. Testing cutscenes and in-game dialogue became tedious because of the amount of lines that needed to be linked to the correct spot. The phrase 5-2 odd could be heard at random all over the office, as misplaced audio would typically be replaced with lines from Chohan. It wasn't just the audio tracks that were buggy though. Lead designer Hajiwara explained in an interview that when bug testing the cutscene where the florist picks up the phone, the entire receiver would get stuck to his hand. He would then put the entire phone inside of his ear. The last major hurdle QA had to overcome was the size of the character's hands. Since the PlayStation 2's graphics were a little bit less detailed, giving Kiryu regular sized hands made it hard to see the punches connecting. So to compensate, they made his hands larger. Unfortunately, this is really noticeable in certain situations. For example, when Kiryu has a drink, the glass would look tiny in his hand. So again, they had to make a change, this time increasing the size of the glass. The only problem is now when he takes a drink, it looks to be the size of a beer mug. Thankfully, most people don't notice that sort of thing in the final product. Did you? Now that the game was ready to go, Nagoshi and his team had to seek permission from Sony Computer Entertainment Japan in order to release the game on the PlayStation 2. Since the PS2 was already a fantastically selling console in Japan, and much like Yakuza was made by and for a Japanese market, it was the only suitable home for this new franchise. Unfortunately, Sony Japan had more than a few issues. The biggest problem was the violence and depictions of sexual content. Compared to modern day video games, and even games that had already been released to Western markets, like GTA, Ryuga Gotoku isn't that bad. For the time and market though, it was groundbreaking. Games in Japan still very much had a toys for children connotation. Releasing a game that parents and teachers would disagree with could go so far as giving the game console a bad name. They immediately told Nagoshi to cut out the sex and the violence. How could he and his team release a game set in the red light district of Kamurocho without adult situations? What kind of a game about a criminal organization would it be without the violence and blood? These themes were important and the team was not ready to bend. If things stay like this, I don't think it will pass the review. How about releasing it as a PC game? Sony told them. It was a slap in the face for Nagoshi and his team. At the time in Japan, offline PC games only made up about 1 to 2% of the entire video game market. Unlike the home video game consoles though, PCs were never marketed as toys for kids, and there was no need to get permission to release software on them. However, not releasing the game on the PS2 would be a death sentence. With a development budget over $1 billion yen, Sega couldn't afford to back down. The stakes were even higher for Nagoshi, who was betting his entire career on the project succeeding. So, Nagoshi fought hard to get his niche game aimed at a niche market on a mainstream console. The back and forth exchanges between Nagoshi's team and Sony eventually exhausted the person assigned to their game, who resigned from the project, telling Nagoshi that a new manager would be sent to deal with them in a few days. Nagoshi was nervous. "My name is Kitagawa. I have been put in charge of this game." The replacement Sony sent was a woman named Yoshie Kitagawa, who was described as entering the meeting in a posh trouser suit and introducing herself politely. In Nagoshi's biography, she's described as being straightforward and frank, which is fitting for a woman who was in charge of Sony's General Affairs Department. In an interview, she said, "I'm often told that I'm rude. I was raised as the youngest of 3 children with 2 older brothers, so I was kind of like the third brother." Now the fate of the entire project rested in the hands of this stern businesswoman.